let me start. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to welcome all of you to the third session of our Food and Sustainability webinar. We continue on our topic about regenerative agriculture, and these webinars, as you all know, are an initiative from our academy. I, Claudia Costa, will be introducing the session today, that will be moderated by our non-executive director, our lovely Professor Cristina Amaro da Costa. Thank you very much, Professor Cristina. So this afternoon we'll be showcasing tools and programs to assist the transition to regenerative agriculture. And to illustrate this journey, we have the pleasure of hearing the work from Common Land Foundation, which is a business-driven landscape restoration and NGO. We will also hear how the biggest Portuguese retailer is assisting farms towards this transition. And finally, on a more practical level, we will know how farmers can identify their progress towards regeneration through visual soil assessment tools. And as always, to support these webinars, we have a dedicated team. We have Rita Silva, our microbiologist. Hello, Rita. Just wave to us. We have Daniela Fonseca, our biochemistry PhD. Hello, Daniela. Just wave to us. Thank you. And we have our lovely Silvia Moreira, food science, technology and nutrition PhD. Hello, Silvia. Just wave to us. Thank you. And they also form our byproduct valorization team, so they can assist you also with any question that you have about byproduct valorization. So let me just quickly remind you about our house rules. So questions are welcome. Daniela, could you kindly just let know our participants how they can take part if questions arise?
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everyone, and welcome. If you have any questions, just go to the Q&A pool and write down your questions and everything you want, of course. I would just like to add that in case there are multiple questions, please just write down first the name of the speaker to which the question is addressed, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniela. And as always, our webinar will take 1.5 hours, and we will be recording the session for later viewing. So if you do not wish to appear, please just keep your camera off. And Rita, can you just let know our participants how they can find these webinars?
Sure. Hello, everyone. In the next week, this webinar will be available in our site. I will put the link in chat where you can review it. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you so much, Rita. Just one note that to remind everyone that Food for Sustainability has ongoing programs on regenerative agriculture. Let me remind me that we will be running again this year our EIT Food Grow workshops that aim to raise awareness and start the discussion on regenerative practices. We also have Transformers, our exchange program for almond and olive producers on regenerative practices. And finally, our Fuel Local program to support the consumption and the breed of autochthonous breeds. Okay, so you can check these projects on our website. You can also drop us an email if you wish more information on these topics or on these programs. So let's start by reviewing some ideas to contextualize the challenges of regenerative agriculture, which I will do by starting to share my screen. So if you just allow me 1 minute and put this on presentation mode. And let's contextualize, let's talk a little bit about what brings us here. So we know that in the past sessions of our cycle on regenerative agriculture, we already seen that agriculture faces very serious challenges. And in fact, quite a lot of people and entities from governments, corporations, researchers, farmers, and consumers, they are engaged in this dialogue or in this negotiation to strike this difficult balance between women welfare, or what we can call the rights to food, and the economic side measured in terms of crop productivity and profitability. And all this needs to also promote environmental sustainability, which will then be the basis again so that we are promoting human welfare. And this is an ongoing dialogue, and this is difficult to strike a final decision because the diversity of the agro ecosystems, the farming models, and the political context that these discussions happen make that these are challenges that are very idiosyncratic or unique to time and space. So there's a range of multiple things that are happening. And this complexity is in fact delaying the identification of single or specific agronomic practices that could alleviate so much of the pressure that our global systems, global food systems are experiencing. And also we have provided some definitions for regenerative agriculture, but what we can say here is that we are talking about goals and aims from regenerative agriculture that want to achieve, or at least to maintain the current agriculture productivity while increasing biodiversity, and in particular to restore and maintain soil biodiversity, but also to foster ecosystem services, which include, for example, carbon capture and storage. And so what we see here is that we have several fields of science that needs to bring together so that we can really achieve a truly environment, social and economic dimension, so that we can really have the so-called sustainable food systems production. And in fact, what we see is that a growing number of researchers are really calling for this systemic transformation around industrial agriculture. But what we observe is that we don't have seen yet a priority in terms of sets of rules and practices. For example, we don't have a certification on regenerative agriculture. So instead, we work towards these goals that should be achieved when a set of practices and technologies start to be developed and implemented, and then will start to contribute to achieving these goals that are proposed by regenerative agriculture. And in fact, this is we are talking about a broad concept that is much less prescriptive than other practice, for example, like such as organic farming. And the implication is that knowledge and understanding of the how and the why of the need for transformation at the farm level is so much in it. So it becomes key for a great understanding of the process that kind of kick off and put in motion this conversion journey or this adaptation journey, so that we don't end trapped in what we might call a niche agriculture, because that's not the intended aim, but we really would like to reach the conventional and the larger farms. So what we see is that in spite of growing international interest, what we are talking, regenerative agriculture demands this systematic approach, linking several fields of science that covers the soils, the plants, the animals, at the societal, at the landscape level, at the climate level. So in order to kick off what we can eventually call these revolutions, we do need to have this systems approach to regenerative agriculture. And some authors have already started to propose that we need this transversal perspective on regenerative agriculture. And the starting point is probably the individual, the farmer. The farmers need to feel motivated and need to feel empowered to start this journey, and needs to feel that this is a movement that falls within their personal values and the things that they are used to and committed to that. And once this new thinking starts to appear, we will see that farmers will start to look at each other, looking for tangible evidence that regenerative agriculture is something that is actually doable, and it's fulfilling its main goals towards sustainability and the regenerative potentials. And these outcomes are then key to start to validate the economic factors. So to put again the implementation or the practical sphere in motion. If we talk about the farmers, we talk about the implementation. There's also a big dimension that some have called the political environments, and for example, the support of municipalities. But not only, there are other institutions, as we'll see here, from the work of the common land and the work that the retailers are already doing with farmers, that are strong enablers of this transformation. And in fact, if we are producing a high value product, this needs to be promoted and establishing through protocols with farmers, and as such we'll be building a network of consumption. And if we have consumers, we are definitely validating and supporting this transition. So within this webinar, what we will try to share with you is examples of these practice that can assist the farmers. So we are now at a slightly different level, at the NGO level of the private for-profit companies, and while also providing some practical tools for farmers to really understand where they are going with their new practice. So let's start this webinar. I now hand over to Cristina, who will now start to introduce our distinguished speakers. I hope you enjoy this session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia, very much. Good afternoon to you all. Are you listening to me? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So we will have three guests, as Claudia said. So the first one is Simon Molenaar from Common Lands. Dr. Simon is an expert in the field of integrated landscape management. He's a director at Common Lands, where he tries to connect multiple stakeholders in business-driven landscape restoration initiatives, mainly looking forward to share knowledge and learning, evaluate impacts, build capacity, and develop digital platforms and engage communities. He also, in this context, co-leads a very interesting partnership entitled 1,000 Landscapes for 1 Billion People. Simon is a guest lecturer at Rotterdam School of Management. He co-leads the European Network for the Advancements of Business and Landscapes Education, and he is a vice chair of the UCN thematic group on business and economic management. Also, and together with the Wageningen University and the Ecosystem Services Partnership, Simon has helped to develop the ESP guidelines for valuation and capturing the benefits of ecosystem restoration. So Simon, please share with us your view on how we connect all these challenges.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you, Claudia. You have already introduced it very well, so I can just go ahead and look for my presentation to share. So
we have seen your presentation, Simon, so we know it's there.
It is here.
It's a bit hidden, but
it's uploading. Can you see it?
Not yet. It's coming.
Now we can see it.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm Simon, and very happy to be in your community today. I've rewatched some of the recordings of your other seminars, and they were really interesting. So I'm looking forward to this one as well. And yeah, the title of my talk will be Empowering Regenerative Farming for Landscape Restoration, because working on landscape restoration and trying to achieve healthy landscapes is our main goal at Common Land. But regenerative farming is really a key asset to that, and a key vehicle. And that's also what I would like to explain in this talk, how we relate to regenerative agriculture and how we view landscape restoration and achieving these healthy landscapes in that context. And then I will also give some examples of what we have learned so far within our community on regenerative agriculture, also connecting it to business development. So yeah, we truly see regenerative agriculture as an engine for regenerative landscapes, you could say. So we take a landscape approach. So that is taking it a little bit, looking at it from a little bit larger scale than the farm level, but really looking at the landscape or regional level. And also we take a long-term perspective. So we look at, for example, a generations period, so at least 20 years. And also we take this business angle, and I will explain you why we do that. So we are a non-for-profit co-developer of large-scale landscape restoration, and we look at these several spheres of influence that you already introduced, Claudia, on the landscape level, but also at the broader systems level. So these enabling environment aspects are really important to us to also work on these. But on the ground, we really are focusing on aligning stakeholders and then establishing landscape partnerships to co-develop these regenerative businesses together. So in that sense, we want to set up these partnerships to achieve proof of concept of business-driven landscape restoration. And to do so, we have developed the 4 returns framework. And if you forget everything in this talk, just remember the 5, 4, 3, and 20. So the 4 is about the 4 returns. We want to achieve 4 returns for healthy landscapes. The 5 is about the process steps that I will explain that we follow. And the 3 is about looking at the landscape in a kind of a zoning approach and then during a long time. So what do we mean with these 4 returns? We look at the return of inspiration, social returns, natural returns, and financial returns. So you could also say this is what we want to achieve as some kind of multiple value creation when we work in a landscape. So the return of inspiration is really about, of course, inspiration, but also participation of farmers, hope and purpose. So really to bring hope back in communities in rural areas that are often leaving the area, and in that sense also bringing a different way of viewing their area again and going back. Social returns is also about social cohesion, but also education, and importantly also, of course, jobs and entrepreneurial activities. So that's mostly about the communities. The natural returns are really about restoring the ecosystems. So it's about biodiversity, carbon sequestration, soil quality, and water quality and quantity. There's a lot of new people coming in, I see. And financial returns is about, of course, sustainable income and profitability. So that's more of the business angle. So we look at people, communities, nature, and business, for short. And then these 5 process elements that we work with are about setting up a landscape partnership to achieve some shared understanding, to derive a vision, taking action, and focus on impact, and especially also learning. So when we look at the landscape partnership, it is really about finding these stakeholders who are passionate about the area where they live and work, and help them to establish a joint initiative that is really owned by themselves. So we don't go somewhere to just do a project. We really want to establish long-term relationships and initiate together with the local stakeholders this partnership. And then, of course, try to achieve some common understanding, which helps to understand the problems in the landscape. So we call that the landscape pane. So what's the problem? What's the ecosystem problem or the ecological degradation? But also what are the social problems or challenges, and also some other. There's a message here. So yeah, also some other issues that can be relevant in a context. And then from that, we build a joint vision with the local stakeholders to achieve this kind of long-term perspective on what they would like to see as developing in the coming years for their landscape, to make it a really thriving landscape with thriving communities and healthy ecosystems. And then we take action by developing this, we call it landscape plan or landscape action plan, which also describes the main activities that will be carried out. But of course, it is not a linear process. There's a lot of iteration and a lot of learning that needs to be done, and a lot of trial and error, and also a lot of learning by doing. We call it also failing forward often, because of course you make a lot of mistakes when you try to experiment with transition and new ways of working. And part of that is also to establish new businesses and new product activities. And then as the last step, we really focus also on what kind of impact are we achieving on these 4 returns, but also what can we learn as a community, and what can we then also take to other contexts and apply there as well. Well, like I said, we also take a larger scale perspective. So when we start to work in a landscape, we always look at a larger landscape. So you can think, starting about 100,000 hectares, for example, is kind of the area at least that we want to look at, to see how we can connect the dots in a landscape, because there's a lot of different features that are relevant, both in the natural zone, as we call it, which is of course mostly related to forests and mountains and water and wetlands, but also the ecological corridors and connecting corridors that are relevant in a natural zone. And we want to also restore those and protect those and be involved in the natural zone. Then the combined zone is really relevant for the regenerative agriculture and agroforestry. The combined zone is really the zone that we focus on with farmers to transition towards regenerative farming, and we think it's the zone that should be developed in landscapes to be really a viable area for, as already introduced, also this combination of biodiversity and productivity, and to really make it a place, what I sometimes call for beauty, biodiversity and business. And then in the economic zone, we co-develop these business ecosystems, also allowing for local processing facilities, and then also the marketing and selling part of the products. But at the same time, it could also be, for example, about gastronomy or tourism. So that's kind of how we divide it. This is not a very strict division. Of course, in reality, a landscape cannot just be, divided into 3 parts or something. So it will always be fluid or flexible. But it's a way of thinking to look at the landscape from a larger whole and to look at these different ways of functioning, and also combining it with the interventions that we think are needed in these different zones. So as a summary, this is the 4 terms framework. It's about long term. It's about these 5 process elements that we want to apply. It's about thinking in large scale landscapes, and it's about thinking in multiple value creation through 4 returns. Then at Common Land, we apply this now in several landscapes, and as you can see, we have a scaling strategy where we start with this smallest circle is what we call the inner scale, and then the middle scale, and then the outer scale, and we want to achieve this strategy to grow from 8 landscapes in the core scale to 50 in the middle scale to 1,000 in the outer scale. And that's also where we relate to this 1,000 landscapes for 1 billion people initiative with other organizations. But in the core scale, we really take on the role that I just described as an initiator to really look for partners in a landscape, local partners who can then set up this partnership and initiative with farmers and other stakeholders in the area. So that's a really intensive role. And if you want to scale, that is not really possible to carry that on, of course, to multiple landscapes. So that's why in the middle scale, we take a little bit a lighter role. So it's more like a catalyst. So we are still involved, but in a partnership with other organizations, we try to achieve the same goals. And then in the outer scale, we are not really involved directly anymore, but we want to empower and capacitate landscape initiatives to take on this approach and to work with them by helping them to be involved in the community with tools, with knowledge, with sharing of experiences. So that's more on the digital platform kind of setting. So going back to this first circle, or this core scale, we have now started to work last 7 years in these 5 countries to start with. So that's in South Africa, Spain, Australia, the Netherlands, and India, with different regions in these countries where we focus on landscape restoration projects and programs. And as you can see, we take on this kind of dual strategy where we set up these partnerships as explained. So in South Africa, that's Living Lands. In Spain, it's Alvalal. In Australia, it was Wide Open Agriculture to start with, but there's now some other partners in the region. In the Netherlands, it's Weiland, and in India, we work together with Nature Conservancy, Samert, and others. And the other parallel trajectory is to set up these businesses. So in every country, for example, in Spain, you can see Almendresa and Habitat. Almendresa is on almonds, Habitat is on olive oil. And for example, in Australia, you can see Wide Open Agriculture, which is, I think, the first listed, at least on the Australian Stock Exchange, but maybe worldwide, listed regenerative agricultural company or food company, producing through their brand Dirty Clean Food, which is also on the slide. And it's really interesting, and we have no time to dig deeper into it, but you can find their website. And also for the other organizations, there's I think information on the internet, but especially also on the 4Returns platform, you can see stories and more deep dives into these landscapes. But it's just to show you that we work in this way to set up partnerships who initiate the program with farmers and other stakeholders in the landscape, and then set up these regenerative businesses together with them and try to find ways to market and sell their products. So that's kind of how we work in these landscapes. And as you can see here, we want to build this pipeline of scalable and also investable landscape restoration programs. This is, of course, an ambitious program, and we have started in some countries, as I explained already, but also are in different phases in different places to build up this portfolio. At the same time, this may look overwhelming, and sometimes it is, and that's why we also really want to build a community. So we really want to link landscape practitioners and landscape people who are involved in landscape from business, from academia, farmers, governments, on this community platform where we share tools and knowledge, but also share stories and try to build some niche communities to connect between geographies or between thematical topics. So that's also very interesting too, because in the end, it's of course always about people working together and connecting them. And so that's why we focus on that as well. And then in that community, we had some discussions last year also on regenerative agriculture and business development. And I just want to share some lessons that we learned. Here I focus on regenerative agriculture in the core landscapes that we work with. So that's with the peat meadow area in the Netherlands, with Weiland. It's on the Altiplano Estepario between Murcia and Almeria in Spain with Alvalal. And it's the western part of Australia with the wheat belt with wide open agriculture, and the Baviaans Kloof in South Africa with living lands and grounded. And these are all organizations who work with farmers on regenerative agriculture. And we discussed some things together as a community, and this may not be complete, but it's a nice insight, I think, where we stand and what we discussed, and I think it really resembles one of the some of the topics that are also in this seminar cycle. So first, what we found in general was that, of course, regenerative agriculture has not been completely defined yet, and there may be some discussion also on how to define and how to monitor things, but we also think that it's really important to build the right narrative, or what we really want to achieve with regenerative agriculture. And at the same time, there may be some need for more clear metrics and performance indicators to show at least how far you are along this road of transforming and turning towards regenerative agriculture. We also found that there may be still some knowledge gaps and some differences that, or at least not differences, but ways of different views between science and practical evidence, and how to reconcile these. And I think maybe Iris can go deeper into that also through the visual soil assessment, and how to reconcile also practice and science and how that connects. Then we found also that there is, in our team at least, a lot of specific mentality, I think, on the how to go about it. So there's a lot of people really exploring and curious and creative about trying new things, experimenting, piloting, being innovative in that sense. And that is also something that we want to stimulate and support. So there's some small funds to just have pilot fund for trying out experiment with farmers on how to go about new practices. But also we always challenge, and people in the team are really thinking big, so they think in this kind of landscape context and even system context and long term, but really start small as well. So it's not just about, you know, large scale only. It's really about starting small and just yeah, get started. Then on the system level, we see that if we look at these different scales from system, landscape, and farm level, we see that we still lack a kind of a market infrastructure to connect the products from these diversified systems and the regenerative agriculture products to the yeah, regular supply chains. Maybe Odina can give her perspective on that later on in her speech. But this is really something that we encountered as still a big challenge, and also yeah, how then to design these pathways for regenerative food systems together with kind of the mainstream companies in the field. At the landscape level, yeah, it is really important to fit. It's not one size fits all, to really fit also your approach and way of working in the landscape and the context of the ecosystems, and of course also the social systems that are there. And also we really found that you need an ecosystem of partners. So just one or a few farmers is maybe not enough to carry on the movement and to really build change in a certain landscape. You need this ecosystem of partners to work together. And at the farm level, yeah, we found that this soil health, like also probably explained in the visual soil assessment, is really important and a key to the farmer's heart in a lot of cases. So soil health is really important. We think these farmer-centric networks are also really yeah, important to support and enable growth of the company, of the movement. And yeah, then there's some questions that arose. For example, the role of agri-technology. Is it supporting and empowering farmers, or may it be something that they become dependent on again? And also data and data collection and data analysis is of course very important, but at the same time, yeah, we really want to emphasize data ownership and how to safeguard that. So this is what we found on the regenerative agriculture part. Then about the business development part, yeah, we think it is important to foster that entrepreneurial mindset and approach, because it really accelerates the transition. And I already mentioned Alfa Laval, and we don't have time to go in depth into all these landscapes, but I think it's nice to mention this as an example that this has really helped in Spain to support and advise farmers through Alfa Laval, and to help them transition towards regenerative agriculture, and then also to set up this this company, this regenerative almond company, Almond Reheza, that is now growing and also connecting with all kinds of off-takers and buyers to have that incentive also for farmers to switch to more profitable and more sustainable practices. Then, yeah, what we emphasize, of course, is to really combine the business view with the landscape view. So it is important to broaden your scope to a landscape view, but also make sure, of course, that your business still is financially viable. And also, yeah, that can be done by nurturing a network. So you don't, as a business, you don't have to do everything yourself or to achieve these 4 returns by yourself, but you can really connect to a network of co-innovators and work through partnerships or an ecosystem of partners. And then, yeah, you already mentioned something about certification and standards, but yeah, we really like to go beyond that and not be stuck into certification because it can be very expensive as well and quite laborious. So we also emphasize telling and selling your story. So it's really about authenticity and stories connecting to consumers to build credibility in several ways. And then an important one for investors that we want to attract is to bring down the risk-return ratio, because if you want to really invest in large-scale landscape restoration, it will be costing a lot of money, especially also to start the movement and start the transition, and also to build these partnerships to start with, and then build these companies and make them profitable. So you also need some time and investments. So if you increase the resilience of the landscape and can generate these multiple returns, then our proposal to investors is that you, of course, in the end also reduce your risk and increase your return by having these thriving landscapes with healthy ecosystems, vital communities, and regenerative economy. So that's the kind of the proposal, but of course you still need to then be able to capture that value. So you can create it, but still you need to find ways and mechanisms to then capture that with public and private parties, and also build that business model in that way. And then to go back to the starting small, you really need to build on what already exists. So you really need to be smart about what is already there, with skills, with the team, with the local situation, and test and prototype ways of working. So it's also really about being realistic and build on what already exists. Just for an illustration, I will not go into depth into these, but these are also on the 4Returns platform. This is a way to combine this business view and landscape view. We call it the 4Returns Landscape Business Model Canvas. So it's both about looking at the landscape and looking at the business, and helps you to get this landscape perspective while also at the same time taking a business perspective. And that's open for feedback, of course, as well. So you can use it, you can test it, and tell us what you think about it. But it's a nice way to help you think both from a business perspective and from a landscape perspective. And then here's some work with this ecosystem services partnership that you mentioned, with some people also in Spain, and how we have translated these regenerative agricultural initiatives with the transformation with Alvalal, also working with La Junquera and Regeneration Academy that was in your last seminar with Jacobo. They also participated in this paper. You can contact me if you want to have it. It's also freely available on the Ecosystem Services Journal website. And of course, you can stay connected through our learning community platform. If you want to dive deeper into business-driven landscape restoration, we developed 2 massive open online courses that you can find on the Coursera platform. And if you want to connect with me, you can always email me, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much, Simon. So we are starting to be a bit late, but we have time for 1 or 2 questions for Simon, if someone from the audience wants to put a question. I'm curious, when we want to start a plan like this one, what would be the first step?
Yes, if you want to start an initiative like this?
Yes.
Yes. So at the moment we are, we call it the nursery. So we have a kind of a stage-gated approach with partners to explore collaboration and to explore initiatives, and then we have ways to work together to start up some experiments to see how we can fund small initiatives to see whether they are really viable for more larger scale for returns approaches. So we start a joint kind of exploration then. So if people are interested, or landscapes initiatives want to work with us, or corporates, we start a conversation, and of course we look at some criteria, some selection criteria for landscapes, and then see how we can develop the program together, because it's always a co-development and a co-investment. But that's how we gradually then decide whether we want to be in this more core scale initiative, or middle scale, or outer scale.
Okay, but can you tell us a bit more about the criteria? What kind of criteria? It has to be a natural landscape. It needs to be joining farmers.
Yeah. At the moment, so there needs to be a degradation problem as well. So there needs to be something to be solved. So also we want to achieve this restoration potential. And at the moment we're also looking at how we are geographically spreading our activities. So we also want to be involved in different biomes. So that's also a criterion. Then there's some criteria relating to risk. Of course, some really risk-prone areas could be excluded as well, although they may be very interesting from a degradation point of view. But it also needs to be safe from, in a way, to be able to set up these activities also business-wise, and also attract some investments. And at the same time, at the moment we just started this agroforestry project in India, which is really interesting to be more relating to small initiatives, small farms. And so we tried to look at diversifying portfolio, and there has to be a very engaged team on the ground. So we really want to work with local people who are really engaged and passionate about their area.
So we have two questions right now from the audience. Are these projects more community driven or business driven, or even public authorities driven? And can you share from the 5 case studies that you have developed? And also Enrique is asking if you have data concerning return of investment in the regeneration of landscapes and agricultural production systems.
I'll go first into the first question, and then maybe shortly repeat the second one. So the first, so it is not so much public authority driven in our programs. We of course want to collaborate with public authorities and governments, but most of the time it is really starting from the ground with local farmers and communities. So in that sense, it is community driven, but we always want to, and I think most farmers are interested in that as well, make it business driven. So sometimes it's not yet so much focusing on that, but we want to let these two go hand in hand. So these are for us two sides of the same coin. So to make it community and business driven. And the second question, can you shortly repeat it? No. I think you're muted.
Christina, you're muted.
Sorry. The second one is if you have data concerning the return of investment in the regeneration of landscapes or agricultural production systems.
Yeah, so we do, and of course partly these are confidential, but what we see is that it takes time to make projects and programs investable and make them attractive for funders. So we work a lot in the beginning also with grants and philanthropic money. So to get going, we really also rely on other on non-commercial funds, soft loans, grants. So And now we see, for example, you can see if you check the Wide Open Agriculture site, they are really profitable at the moment. For Spain, it is, I think, in some kind of tipping point where the Almendraza company is becoming profitable right now. So but it takes some time. So it's not easy to make it profitable or investable, and so that is really taking an effort that we want to safeguard by taking this long-term perspective. Because if you take a short-term perspective, it will never work to transition, and also to make this blended kind of finance work with public and private money, but also with grants and philanthropic money.
Thank you, Simon. It would be very nice to keep talking with you all the afternoon, because it would be very nice to know how to start in some of the Portuguese areas at least. But we have to go to the second guest. So our second guest is Ondina Afonso. She's a food engineer and has over 20 years experience in academia and the agri-food sector. Currently, she is the head of the quality and research at Sonai MC, the market leader in food retail in Portugal, where she shares the Producers Club of Sonai MC, a strategy that tries to strengthen competitiveness and innovation and sustainability of national fresh producers. Ondina is also the chair of the Food Committee at Eurocommerce, and since 2002, she has been working as an independent expert at European Commission. So Ondina, can you please share us your presentation? Yes. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I think you are already seeing my presentation, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity and for inviting me to be here today with you and to share our work. And I'm going to focus, of course, on regenerative farming and some initiatives that we have. But first, just to refresh, because our vision or strategy at this moment inside the Producers Club is to be very much in line with Farm to Fork strategy, where we have, I think everybody knows, all these objectives to attain till or by 2030. So to reduce the chemical pesticides, to reduce fertilizers, to have more organic farming and more area of organic farming. And I just would like to make a kind of parenthesis about this organic farming. What I've been felt during some forums that I've been participating at the European Commission is that now there is a kind of perspective that organic farming is not enough or can be an alternative, but for example, regenerative agriculture can also be an alternative of the organic farming. So for me, I think it's important, this step that the European Commission can do, because we know that organic farming has some limitations, and as retailers, of course, and working daily in a daily basis with agriculture, with producers, we feel and we felt and we feel that it would be important to open this sustainable agriculture to other types of or other alternatives. Okay, and also it's important to to look to this definition of food system, and I think we already during the afternoon we have been looked to this, but it's in just in a scheme. But for me, it's very interesting to see that on the middle of the scheme and all this food system, it's the men, it's us, women and men. Of course, I don't want to be just to focus on men, and we have the gender issues here. No, it's not that. But anyway, it's important because, and I also would like to say that yes, DG Santé, which means the general direction of health from the European Commission, that is managing farm to fork strategy. It's not agriculture, it's not innovation or research or environment, is the health. So it's important. So we can look to the biological system, how things are grew, and how animal is produced, or how cattle is handled in their production areas, and then how all this feed and food goes to the economic system, and the impact on our system or health system and social system. It's very important when we look to Portugal and we have this food culture and our heritage about food. We cannot forget that we still have, and this food culture is also the base of many small companies that are working, and they need support to maintain their activity. And of course, the political system with the regulations and all the support that they give to this the other part of the food system. So today, I think, and everybody I think can agree with me, agriculture is in the center within, of course, people, but it's in the center of our life. Has been always, but now has the big importance, and it's interesting the expectations that there is, and of course the pressure that there is to the on the agriculture to have more sustainable world and to be very much in line on the One Health concept. So what everybody's asking from agriculture is to have this balance between environment, health, and economic, and in an innovative and holistic approach. And at Continente Producers Club, we decided last year to launch this declaration for sustainability, because we started to pave the way regarding some initiatives very much in line, as I said before, with farm to fork strategy, but we decided to make this kind of an umbrella of all the things that we were doing and add more. So we have some add-ons on these activities, and now our main concern and focus is on this declaration. So it's a volunteer declaration. We presented to our producers, and we have, of course, much of them are looking and seeking to be with us in some of the initiatives. And I would like to share with you the principles of this declaration, and you will see again here much of the farm to fork strategy. The first one is to reduce the use of pesticides and nutrients. We are looking, of course, for fruits and vegetables, olives, wheat, because we have now a work in Alentejo to have this wheat for our bread in our bakeries, in our stores. and rye, and that it's another cereal that we started to work with the Alentejo producers, and rice production also. The second is has to have with the good practices at livestock, at cattle, for instance, but also in other types of animals. So the animal welfare, it's much on in our and as a certification too. We are boosting this type of certification near our producers, and also the better use of natural resources when we are talking about, of course, livestock production, but also when we talk about agri-food production. And I can share, for example, when we have products from or producers that are producing delicatessen or cheese, traditional products, and about the origin of the milk or origin of the meat. So they are inside this frame to better use these resources. And of course, we have a dedicated team to help. And I forgot to say, but we have a scientific committee where we have people from the research, and they are willing to, of course, to help producers, and we have some specific projects to support all these principles and the activities that are under these principles. So the fourth principle is to promote biodiversity. We have some projects with this or under this topic. Also, another principle is to promote carbon capture and storage. We already heard about this this afternoon, and also we have this promotion of the extensive production when we talk about cattle, which is very important, and we are also with the Ministry of Agriculture to have this a kind of logo or certification from the ministry, and to help our producers, like the ones that are again in Alentejo, and where the animals are living in a very free and all the welfare rules very well applicable and of course observed. On the seventh principle, also and more linked to the products that are or have a package, for example, we are looking for the sustainable source of these raw materials and plastics, or not plastic, but other types of materials. And it's important if we look again to that food system, we cannot forget these social responsibility practices or good practices that we have to have at farm and livestock production. So it's something that we are very concerned, and we are also working with our producers. And whenever it's possible, the production of healthier products, whenever it's possible to reduce salt, sugar, and fat, and substitute with the other ingredients that are more natural or less content, for example, salt and sugar, and also take or phase out some additives that we have, and which is, even it is legal, we would like to turn is a more clean label. The 10th principle is the circular economy. Of course, we want to reduce the waste that we have at the production level. And the 11th and almost the topic that we are here today is to increase the supply of organic products and to promote other sustainable means or alternatives like regenerative agriculture, as I mentioned before. And specifically on this topic of regenerative agriculture, and this is the sum of the initiatives of this declaration. I must say that we have 40 different initiatives for that we have this time span of 3 years. Some that I'm sharing here with you, and which are linked to regenerative agriculture. We have this certification zero residue, where we already have 37 producers that are under this program. I would say it's a partnership that we have with a Spanish entity that is helping us, and the producers. Of course, it's an investment that we are doing with our producers, and also we have a partnership with another entity, a Portuguese university, and looking for this efficient application of fertilizers and the efficient use of water. Also with one with 20 producers and another one with 17, and it's very, very new. We closed this 2 weeks ago. We have the agroecology program, which is looking for the biodiversity, soil protection, and carbon capture. We have a WhatsApp group with the producers, and we have many things under this program. And again, with a partnership with a Portuguese university. So we always try and go for this partnership, like a triple helix, where we have research, we have production, and we have retailers. Of course, we try to support this transference of knowledge. We invest with them, but of course, at the end of the day, what we want is to offer to our clients, as we used to say, the best of Portugal. So more sustainable, more innovative products, and healthier, of course. So thank you, and for your attention and for the invitation again.
Thank you very much, Andina. It's a very interesting project that Continent has for, I think, 30 years or something, at least.
Yeah, actually, SONAI has more than 35 years, and the Producers Club has 22 years old.
From the 90s, I think I've heard before.
Yes.
So we already have a question for you.
Yeah.
Can you please specify in what consists the agroecology program that you have mentioned in the end of your presentation?
I couldn't hear, but is it on the chat?
Yes, it is. So Enrique is asking if you can specify in what consists your agroecology program.
Yeah, it's to look for this dimension that I shared with the biodiversity. So we are starting. We just closed, as I said, with this partnership last week, and we have some. We are going to start by a kind of diagnostic with these producers, and then we are going to implement some. But I have here my notes, and I can share more details if you permit me.
Yeah.
Let's see. But anyway, I can go.
We have a lot of other questions already, so.
Yeah. So okay, and I will see.
And
yeah.
maybe we can read them, and then you decide whatever you want to answer and how. So Simon is asking, how do you promote and support these activities? By farmer support groups? How do you pay for your investments? And do you market these products in a specific way? Is there a price premium offered to the producers?
Yeah, what we, for example, I can give you the example of zero certification, where we have this Spanish entity, and what we do is we pay half of the, or I can say we are on the second year of project. The first year we pay all the expenses linked to the consultant, all the training sessions, and half of the investment that the producers had with their own space and area dedicated to this production. The second year, it's where we are now. We still pay all the consultant, the hours, training, and the investment, of course, on the field is made by the producers. Yes. And we started to have, last year we already have actually watermelon and melon in our store, but we haven't communicated because we were just piloting this project. Now we have some cabbages, white cabbages, and strawberries with and it's you can see the communication on the label, but till the end of the year we will have much more. Yes. Thank you for the question.
Cristina, you are muted. Okay.
Sorry. So another question is, how does SONAI assist and support farmers in transitioning to the new sustainable agriculture and production practices, so they can follow the principles? I think you have more or less answered, but
yeah, of course. I would say that these principles are a consequence of the work that we've been done with producers, because along the year our club has some training or some events, some meetings where we share with them, and we try to figure out what we can do with them. So this declaration is a consequence, as I told before, because we felt that we could put everything under an umbrella, and it's a way to make this transition with time, not with rush, not to stay till the end of 2029 and then everybody is running because bad news are coming. So it's what we are doing.
Danielle is asking if you can tell that consumers are buying more of these products comparing with others that you have in your store.
No, it's we are giving the first step. So I can't say. I can say, and I don't have any data regarding your question, because it's we are at very beginning, so we don't have sufficient data. Anyway, and of course, I must say that consumers are much more, I would say, arguing or questioning or trying to know how the things are produced, and of course everybody knows, and where is the origin, and you can see on the social media and all. Whenever we post something, there are many questions about it. So it's a way to know that we have to do something. Yes.
In these last 20 years, the consumption of these SONAI products have increased, I imagine, because I can see them in the supermarkets.
Well, I can say that when we look to fresh, or I would say fruits and vegetables, there is an increase of consumption, of course. And the last 2 years, we observed much more because of pandemic, and people were linked to the consumption, for example, of orange or other types of products to boost their health. So we have been assisting this type of behavior. Nevertheless, I think in a long time or long span of time, it's increasing, yes, the consumption of fruits and vegetables.
Okay, so last question. So Jose is asking how the consumer monitorize the application of the principles, and I would add to that this participation in the Producers Club means that you have a certification process over the others, over Global Gap, over organic.
Yeah. Yes, we have our own standards, which means that to be part of Producers Club is not only to be Portuguese, but has to have good practices, of course. And we accepted. There are many of the producers that now have Global Gap certification, but it's not a must. It's a nice to have. And whenever they don't have, we try to help them to look to this, for example, type of certification. So it's the way that we feel. And also, on the cattle and the animal production, we have this checklist whenever we go to visit them and to help and to share with them where we feel that they must do something better. And yes, it's the question is how can the consumer monitorize the application of the principles? As I said before, we are giving the first step, so they can see at the stores the products that are going to appear. And also we have again with Global Gap this GGN label, which is a certification of chain of custody, which means that is a way that we guarantee that all the products that are produced under these rules of Global Gap, good practices at agriculture, are the ones that are in the stores and are not mixed with other ones that are not produced like that. So it's a way that we give visibility to the producers. And we started also with some grapes. And till the end of the year, we will have with other fruits and vegetables to this GGN. I think I have here. I think, but no, I don't. This label to share with you.
Christina, I don't know what happens to your mic.
Yeah, no, it's working. Thank you, Ondina. It was a very nice presentation and conversation.
Thank you.
We have to go ahead. So now we will have Iris Mota from EIT Futsals. Iris has a degree in biology and a master degree in plant chemistry. And during her studies, Iris got in contact with permaculture at the Horta School, which raised her interest in ecosystem-based approaches at the farm level. Her thesis was about the mycorrhizae effect of plants under hydric stress and its repercussions on the production of secondary metabolites with commercial interests. Iris has been working as a freelancer, providing services related to soil and biodiversity assessments, and nowadays, working at EIT Futsals, Iris had the opportunity to visit about 60 farms where the transition to regenerative agriculture was happening, and her purpose was to talk to farmers how to visually assess the soil. So I imagine that you are going to explain that experience to us. Please, Iris.
Hello. Yes, I'm going to explain how it all worked out. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Are you listening well? Can you listen well? Okay, I will share my presentation. Is it working? No. Yes?
Please, Iris.
Okay. So today I will talk about a tool called the Visual Soil Assessment that we can use in general in agriculture. And basically I will talk first about the definition. What is the toolkit? What do we need to do this soil assessment? The procedure, the indicators, and some curiosities and conclusions. So first of all, the definition. Visual soil assessment is based on the visual assessment of key soil states and plant performance indicators of soil quality presented on a scorecard. So basically, in 2008, there was the compilation of how to perform this type of assessment in a FAO document that is readily available online and free for us to check the information that is there. So basically, soil indicators are dynamic. They are capable of changing under different management regimes and land use pressures. And being sensitive to change, they are useful early warning indicators of changes in soil condition. And this is where the VSA appears. So in the VSA method, each indicator is given a visual score of 0, poor, 1, moderate, or 2, good, based on the soil quality observed when comparing the soil sample with photographs in the field guides or with a reference sample, which I will explain later what does this mean. So because soil indicators are relatively more important than others, in the assessment, the VSA provides a weighting factor of 1, 2, and 3, and the total of the VSA rankings will give an overall soil quality index of the sample that we are evaluating. So basically, the toolkit, we need very simple things, nothing special. So basically, we need a spade with about 20 centimeters to take a cube of soil. We need a plastic basin to do a drop shatter test, which I will explain later. A hard square board to put in the bottom of that plastic basin. A plastic bag where we can order our soil aggregates by size and dimension, a knife to do some evaluation of the penetrability of the soil and the density of roots, measure tape to measure all those distances, the VSA field guides, and the pads of scorecards where we can record all the assessments that we are doing. So here I have a video, which I hope it will work. It's only 1 minute. Can you listen to? No?
Listening. We are not listening.
Okay, so I'll explain the video. So he's doing the shatter. He's dropping the block of soil. It didn't break up very readily. So he will look for signs of natural cracks in the block, not forcing anything, just looking for the natural cracks. And now he's ordering this sorting. So only 1/4 of fine material, so it's considered a poor condition. And here we have a situation where the soil is in a good condition with fine material throughout the profile. So basically, this is the process. You take the cube of soil 3 times, and then you will order by aggregate dimension and compare with the field guide, or preferably with a reference sample, okay? So here the procedure, I didn't use a plastic basin with the hard boards in the bottom. I just used 2 hard boards where I did the drop shatter tests and where I ordered the aggregate. So I used the same infrastructure for the both things. So when it should be carried out. So this should be done when the soils are moist and suitable for the cultivation. In Spain, we said in tempero, they should be in tempero. Basically, you can check this by doing a worm test. If you are able, if the soil cracks while you are trying to do the worm, or if you are not even able to form a worm, in the case if the soil is sandy, the soil is suitable for testing. If you are able to do the worm, the soil is too wet to test. So for a representative assessment, there should be you should sample 4 sites over a 5-hectare area. And basically here the reference sample is a sample from undisturbed area. So a nearby forest or someplace that doesn't have any type of disturbance. And another advice that I give is that it is at the same height as the one that you are taking out from your property, because you can have some movements of soil, topsoil layers, and then sometimes it might be a variable that you don't want to consider. So when you are selecting the reference sample in a nearby woods or forest or any undisturbed area, just take into account for it to be at the same height. And furthermore, select sites that are representative of your property, but not places that have a heavy traffic or near roads. But still, if you want, for example, to test an area in your property that has the markings of tractor wheels, for example, what type of pressure this is doing to your soil, you can do that also. So, and always record the position for future monitoring if required. So the indicators, they are about 13 to 14. The first one is it's considered an important indicator, the soil structure and porosity. I will return to this indicator in the next slide because I think it's one of the most important ones. However, here the soil structure is very important. Mostly for herbaceous crops, but in general for all of the crops, since it regulates soil aeration, gas exchange, soil temperature, soil infiltration, erosion, water movement and retention, among others. So this is a very important indicator. The soil color, you can see here that this is a picture I took in a farm. So we have very different colors, but also the shape of the aggregates. I will talk about this in the next slide, but the shape is also very important when doing these observations, the shape of the aggregates. So in general here, we all know that the darker the color, in general, the greater the amount of organic matter. Here we have the so-called soil model, so the third indicator. So this indicator provides us mostly information about the state of drainage and aeration of the soil. They are like some little dots. Basically, this indicates us that some anaerobic conditions, the lack of oxygen is forming in our soil. So it's reducing the iron and manganese from their oxidized brown, orange to gray ferrous manganese oxide. So as oxygen depletion increases, orange and finally gray mottles start to predominate our soil. So this is a good indicator of the drainage state of our soil. Here we have the penetrability. So we already had before aligned our aggregates, and now we have a hole in our property, and we go back to it with the knife and the measuring tape, and we push the knife without making force to check if any layer of our soil until the 20 centimeters offers some resistance. So basically, this is an important indicator because we know that the soil penetrability is important it's a rooting medium for plants. and soils with some type of restriction due to a compacted layer or the so-called hard pan restrict vertical root growth and development, causing roots to grow sideways. So when we are evaluating this, we can also be looking at the pattern of growth if they are growing sideways, exactly in the area where we feel that there's some resistance to our knife. Okay, so, but sometimes this can be related to hard pans, but it can be related also to other non-physical causes that I will explain in this next indicator. So we have here the depth and density of roots, where we evaluate the root length and density, because it's a good indication of the crop's root system, and has, we know, the physical action of roots from plants that have a fascicular root system or pivotant root system, and the exudates these roots produce. They promote the development of soil structure, aeration, and drainage. So here, when we see that the root system is not very developed, it can be due to that hard pan, the compacted layer, by the use of the excessive land pressure, but it can be also related to low soil, the soil pH and temperature, the nutrient deficiencies, low levels of mycorrhizal fungi or low oxygen levels, because, for example, in a situation that there's a low drainage, the lack of oxygen and anaerobic conditions, it can lead to the accumulation of toxic levels of sulfides or ethylene, so byproducts of organic matter reduction reactions. And this can be also a reason to our underdeveloped root system. So the next indicator is a famous one, so the root nodule, so where we have our Rhizobium bacteria fixating all that nitrogen. So this is an indicator of, in general, a good soil health, but it also may be due to a high presence of nitrogen in our soil. In that situation, we don't normally see nodules, or it is related to some adverse soil that inhibits this relationship root bacteria. And here, when we are evaluating these, we are also watching for the color of the nodules. So when they are brown and even better, when they are pink appearance, like the ones in this photo, supposedly is an indication of a high activity of nitrogen fixation by the Rhizobium bacteria. So here we have another indicator that is not so famously known as the previous one. It's called the rhizos heat. So basically, it's a kind of coating. And when we see basically soil clinging to the roots, and the roots appear brown instead of naked white. So this is an indicator of life in the soil, mainly microbiological activity in the rhizosphere, so in the root zone. So these microorganisms feed on plants' root exudates, and in turn the microorganisms secrete binding agents which hold soil particles together around the roots in aggregate structure, which indicates a good soil health. This one is very famous, so counting here, we don't use a ranking, we directly count the worms in that cube of soil, so a high number of worms may be an indicator of soil health and organic matter. Then we have the responding, so now we are our visual assessment is already a more paysagistical one of the property itself. So prolonged waterlogging of the surface makes the soil more susceptible to damage under tractor wheels, reduces the period of vehicle access, it delays soil preparation work. So this is also an important indicator, or where will we prioritize our work area in our because that's the purpose of the VSA, is just to, how Simon said, start small and prioritize where to start. That's what this tool can help us to do. Here we have the surface crusting. So as we know, it reduces water infiltration and soil water storage and increases the runoff. So this type of crusting is more pronounced in fine textured soils with poor aggregate stability. And this can be controlled with green covers. So something that is very talked about in regenerative agriculture, because applying a green cover after harvest or before the next crop helps to prevent this crust formation by minimizing the dispersal of that topsoil layer by rainfall and irrigation. And also it helps to reduce crusting by intercepting the large raindrops before they can strike and damage that ground surface. There's a lot of reasons. Besides that, the ground cover also acts like a sponge and helps to retain water for a longer time while it infiltrates in the soil. So it can work also as a barrier and have that flux of water infiltration in our soil. Soil erosion. So the soil erosion can develop surface crusts, tillage trays, as we can see here in the bottom, and also a surface runoff, or this phenomena called dust bowls, where you see a lot of dust in the air. That's not dust, that's our topsoil going away from our property. So again, this can be controlled by having some green cover and evaluating which areas are more critical in terms of this situation. Then, as observations in our scorecards, we can also make some notes about root diseases and deficiency symptoms in our crop, and also make those observations so we can have more monitoring data. Here is the first indicator that I told you about, that I think it's a very interesting one. So basically here we have three levels, kind of, with different colors. And here the soil structure is classified according to the size, the shape, the firmness, the porosity, and relative abundance of soil aggregates. So basically, a soil with a considered good structure are friable, fine, have a good porosity, they are subangular, and they are normally rounded with some galleries from worms, and they have this type of shape. Here, when I talk about porosity, is when you take an aggregate and you see that you have this type of sand at the surface of the aggregate. That's the pores. And the pores are very important for circulation for formation of bacteria niches in those areas. And here in the bottom, you have a soil with a considered pore structure, because we have large, dense, very firm, angular aggregates in subangular blocks. So here we can see in the bottom right, that shape that I told you about in the photography of soil color, that you have this very angular shape of the aggregate, a very strict line. And this is very common in this type of structure, to observe this type of shape in the aggregates. But something that you have to be cautious about doing this is evaluating aggregates that have markings from the spade. So those ones you just ignore them. You just try to be cautious about it, because it can lead you to false assumptions. Here, curiosities and conclusions. So the VSA manual from the FAO that I showed you previously, it has also some indicators for specific crops. If you are a farmer that has annual crops or olive orchards, pasture, vineyards, or wet, in the VSA that is free and that is online manual, you can go directly to your crop if it's one of these, and they will have there like specific indicators for evaluating that crop. And for example, in the case of pasture, it's advised evaluating also the pasture quality, the pasture gross color and gross relative to cattle urine patches and pasture utilization. So it's very complete and it's readily available. Here it's a little approach, a first approach to the data we gathered, but we have to take into account that due to the pandemic, we can only make a visual assessment. We could make only a visual assessment last year. And then we have also some noise for our data because there are some farmers that entered the program, but they already started working the soil long ago, and others who started working in their soil much later. So we'll have to align this data because in the surveys, some farmers just say for many generations or the whole life. They don't just specify when did they start. So that's a problem for us to do some statistical analysis. So basically, people correct for this analysis. I decided for this talk to choose just one quantitative variable, the organic matter from the physical-chemical analysis, and for visual indicators. Furthermore, we can see that this MCA does not explain most of the variance of the data. So dimension 1 is the one that explains the most, but even so, it explains only 5.6% of the data. Once again, this is the first approach, and it will be only possible to draw conclusions by comparing this data with the ones that we will collect this year. So, but in dimension 1, the most interesting data are found in the positive dimension here, which also, according to statistical evaluations made before this graph, it's what this positive side of dimension 1 is the one that explains most the organic matter factor, okay? So we can see that seems to be a relationship with the soil structure with a higher ranking, also with the soil color with a high ranking too, and also with the earthworm counting from 3 to 8, here you cannot see. And also, it seems to be a relationship with the higher rankings with regards to the rhizoheath that I explained later on. That because we can see that they are all in the dimension positive side. In organic matter, we see a greater dispersion. However, on the positive side of dimension 1, also we see the highest values of organic matter, the 13, 6%, and 14. So even though this not explains a lot, because it's a first approach, the data seems interesting because we can see that probably if we have a better soil structure, it allows for a greater integration of organic matter because there is, for example, less compaction and greater porosity of the aggregates, which in turn allows a greater number of earthworms since there seems to be a relationship between soil organic matter and the amount of earthworms present. So, and this in turn also allows for a greater ability of root penetration, which can lead to a greater interface roots bacteria and a greater microbiological activity, which we will see in the rhizoheath, which in turn will be verified in the color of the soil, darker, which in turn is verified here in the highest values of organic matter. So they are all interdependent. It looks like an interesting pattern, but once again, I have to reiterate that this is just the first approach to the data, and this year will be important to compare the data with the previous year. And this is a work that I'm doing. We will include more data from the physical-chemical analysis and also the data from the surveys once we fine-tune a bit the answers the farmers gave us. So in conclusion, the VSA is a practical guide. As you have seen, you have very little tools, simple tools, Besides soils parameters, you also have some specific indicators for specific crops, as I told you. And it can be, and in my opinion, it should be complemented with physicochemical soil analysis for a more complete soil monitoring data, and basically start observing, start doing that in our fields, and start using these metrics in order to realize which area in our property should we start first. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
attention.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting work that you are working on. So we don't have questions yet, but I would ask you two things. One of them is in relation to your perceptions. Do you think farmers that are doing regenerative agriculture for longer periods are having better soils, or it's not possible to say that, to perceive that? And also, do you think farmers will use that methodology by their own after you have finished your job or your work, or not?
Already answering the second question, yes, they already started using, because in our case, we didn't use a scorecard, even though it's also very practical. We were using a mobile app, a phone app, where you could even put already the GPS location and the photographies that you are observing. And they already started working, and they were very excited with having that tool by their hands and how to start checking on certain areas of their property. With regards to the other question, is highly variable, because sometimes you have farmers that at one time, and yes, you can see that they are a bit a step further, but at the same time you see very motivated farmers that started later on, but they also have a very interesting soil structure, and it depends also, it's a bit site specific also, the type of results that you can have during the period that you are transitioning. Yes.
Thank you, Iris. Simon, do you want to put your question by yourself, as you are one of our guests?
Yes, so thank you. Yes, well, I really like the VSA, and thanks for your presentation. And I was wondering, did you find that farmers really also increase awareness about soil quality on their own farm by using it? And kind of in the line of Christina's question, did you compare which specific systems did you already compare until now, and what did you find?
So basically, the first question, some of the indicators they already knew, but many of them were something new for them. For example, the rhizomes, of course, they knew the part of the earthworms, for example, but they were very interested mainly in the soil structure, how to see the patterns and how to take a reference sample and how to compare. So that was very, for my experience, for most of the farmers, that was very like a light bulb moment of, this is interesting, this makes sense, because I was evaluating it, and then after the evaluation they told me what they did there, and they even recognized themselves why that was happening to their soil because of the practices they did in that area. So with regards to the second part, as I was telling, we have still not a lot of data to compare. This year will be more interesting to make those comparisons, and of course we want to make a cross with the data that the farmers gave us that is more qualitative from the surveys, and that's where we will evaluate all these questions from Christina and from you, Simon, to see if there's a relationship between even practices, because some people entered in the program that are conventional farmers that want to transition. And then that are already doing ecological production, but they are still using a lot of machinery and a lot of mechanized process. So here we have, and that's the type of production. It's very interesting to cross with the VSA and physicochemical analysis, but we are still in that process.
Thank you, Iris, very much. So Claudia is asking us to finish, and a final question to the panel. What would be your #1 advice to start a regenerative journey? I think it's for the three of them, Claudia. Yes? So please, Simon or Iris or Ondina.
I didn't understand the question.
So Claudia is asking, what would be your #1 advice to start a regenerative journey? I imagine to the farmers, the question. What would you say to the farmers, to the consumers, to all of us?
Maybe Simon can start, or...
Simon, can you start, please?
Yes, well, I would like to recommend then to really look for peers. So if farmers want to start a journey, to really look for peers and the supportive structure. So, for example, the one that that Ondina told about. So really looking for your local or regional support structure with others to do it together.
Great advice, I think.
Yeah, I would say the same. Partnership, yes.
Yes.
I would say partnership also, but also training a bit that way of observing your property, a kind of way of seeing in an ecosystem way your farm, and start small. Just you can still do the things as you are doing and start prioritizing certain areas and do some dots to see also how it goes. So that's my advice.
Steps and partnership, I think they are very good advices. So Claudia, now the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. We are well beyond our time. I guess I thank everyone that stayed with us for so long. Also our guests for keeping until the end. I hope, I'm going to finish now. I hope everyone has enjoyed. We have here really a systematic view on this need to ignite this transition to regenerative practices. Is not just one single approach. Will be a multitude of approaches. And thank you so much to our guests to bringing this view here to us and to our participants. And just to remind that we will continue with our sessions next week. Next week we'll be focusing on livestock, and we will also bring a case of success here in Portugal. You probably all heard about the project Vacas Felizes in Açores, and so we look forward to have you again next Thursday with us. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a nice evening. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.